On the revenue side, we don't look at budgets, in 1 year cycles. We look out 3 to 5 years, as anyone should with budgets. And I know people talk about all these different revenue categories and things that are new. That's because Ansonia has primed itself for good long-term growth with all the work that's been done over the last 10 years. And I think over the next year to 3 years, you're going to see some things really starting to happen that are going to explode downtown, and more importantly, going to bring in a tremendous stream of reoccurring revenue. And that's what we're trying to harness.
Right.
I think, if you look particularly on Main Street, in the area 165, the SHW, all that property that's, being cleaned up, being developed. We have, and again, Sheila and Jasmine, you and I talked quick about it the other night after the public meeting. We have something that's right on the cusp of happening. Sheila's been working very hard with a fantastic economic development opportunity that is going to be a very strong reoccurring revenue for many years to come. So, people talk all the time about, we put this, use of future revenue, and everybody immediately ties it to the WPCA.
But the mayor did.
Well, we see what the mayor's talking about, though. The mayor's talking about the money globally, and he's looking at all the revenue coming in as a package. We do not need, and I'm going to make this very clear, we do not need the WPCA to balance our budget. I know that is a huge political talking point.
But wait a second.
We do not need it. It's nice to have. It's very helpful.
I was under the impression from watching that meeting the other day, with no political skin in the game, just as someone who really loves to watch municipal meetings.
Yeah.
But I was sitting there, and it got to this point where the city was talking about, they almost explicitly said that, well, we can have this low mill rate if we sell the WP, or this low mill rate increase if we sell the WPCA. It really gave the impression, and maybe it was a mistake, because I think it was even in the presentation, Jasmine, right? Where it said, if we sell the WPCA, we have this sweet little bearable mill rate increase. But if we don't sign the deal right now, if you don't put your John Hancock on the dotted line, disaster, mill rate through the roof.
The table of comparisons of mill rates between towns that had Ansonia with and without a WPCA sale, that confused me.
Yeah, and that might have been a little confusing to the average person, because I think it took a lot of things into account. If you look at just the amount of bonding authorization that we received, if we start to put all these projects on, there's going to be additional costs. So when you have this cash available with the WPCA, it gives you the ability to pay for a lot of these projects in cash. Now, I know a comment was made, well, we voted in November, and, what are we going to do with all this bonding? What the vote in November was authorization from the residents, number one, to do the projects, and then number two, to potentially borrow if we need money to produce those projects. It's not that we've already bonded money. So if we're able to pay for some of these projects in cash, we don't need to borrow the money. Borrowing money puts costs on the city going out in future years. That's what drives the mill rate up, right? Because if you sell the WPCA, as an example, and you realize this $30 million in cash, that's $30 million that could be used to pay for some of these projects. If we were to sell the WPCA, and I'm not saying we're doing this, but this as an example, we could pay for the school in cash, not have to borrow the money at all. So those are things that you have to look at. I did a little synopsis of some of the uses of the money, and if you look at the four recent bond issues, 2016, the two bond issues from 2018, and the bond issue from 2019. We currently pay with principal and interest $1,347,000 a year. It's the equivalent of $16,715,000 of principal. We could pay that off by selling the WPCA and recoup all of that savings. So the savings alone is $351,000 in just interest payments.
Well, one thing that's just going around in Ansonia as this budget talk starts is that the fund balance isn't as healthy as it should be, because I think in 2023, I'm looking at a
September
Board of Aldermen meeting minutes, or maybe it's boat
meeting minutes.
Yeah, September 2023,
Mhm.
the boat voted to use about $1 million in fund balance in various spaces in the budget.
Yep.
And so how did that have any impact on the fund balance? And was the number after that happened, is that the fund balance that's reflected in the materials that the city handed out the other night?
Yeah.
And then the second question is because you're behind on one audit, right? Isn't that the year that's unaudited still at this point?
The audit for fiscal 23 has not yet been completed. Unfortunately, we had some staff turnover, and right now and again, I'm not passing blame. I'm not putting anyone under the bus, because the finance teams, the Ansonia City and Board of Education work very well together. But there's some new people on the finance side of the Board of Education, and it's just getting everything tied together. So that is what is slowing the audit down. And if you look across the state, a lot of communities with everything that are going on actually submitted late audits this year. But
then there's Derby, who got themselves into a pretzel for constantly,
right.
And then it turned out then they would pass a budget, and then the audit would eventually happen, and then it would turn out, oh yeah, that fund balance that was on paper, that was BS, because we used all that to close a hole. And I think you hear people in Ansonia on the street, whether it's politically motivated or not, saying, "Oh, is that a potential? Is that what's happening?"
Listen, is Seymour's audit done?
I assume so.
It's not.
Aren't you in Seymour?
Yeah, it's not. That's what I'm saying. So you can't.
So you're responsible because you're in two places with late audits. I'm just kidding.
Well, it's Seymour, because we had the longtime finance director, Doug Thomas, retired. Seymour brought in a new guy, Javier, who's extremely competent, CPA, 085. He's got all the credentials. But, it takes some time, and that's what's caused some of the delay. But do you hear one word about Seymour's being late? No, because it's not politicized in Seymour like it's politicized in Ansonia. But to get back to Jasmine, I think it was your original question. Maybe it was Eugene's.
Well, what did the fund balance? Yeah, the $1 million that was taken out of the fund balance. Why did that happen?
$6,377,676. That takes into account that $1 million being used.
And then what happened with that $1 million? How did that happen? Why was that needed?
You had a combination of three things. There was some shortfalls in revenue, and there was some unexpected expenses that came in higher than we had anticipated.
And some of which has been bandied about is, okay, there was $1 million taken out of the fund balance, and then there was the budget created and passed last year that had that $5 million in anticipated revenue, money that wasn't on hand but was coming sometime into the future. And at the time, we were told it was going to be the development of the Ansonia copper and brass site, but that didn't happen. And now it says $7 million in anticipated revenue.
Different projects.
I'm sorry?
Different projects.
What happened to the $5 million? Because that's being interpreted. And actually, last night, the mayor and Sheila both used the word whole when they talked about that.
Well, listen, you can label it anything that you want. I mean, currently it's a whole because it's money that's not there. But the anticipation of the $5 million stems from, and again, Jasmine, we talked about this the other night. We have an energy efficiency project that we're in the final stages of. There's been public hearings on it. We actually have a meeting on Tuesday that we hope to be finalizing and solidifying things. And that, again, is an energy efficiency project. We're going to put in a large fuel cell on the SHW 165. I never get them right, which is which.
Right.
There's a lot of main street
property
addresses.
Yeah, that actually will bring in a little over 5.2 million. So that is what that money is coming from. It's not tied to the WPCA. The project or the the 7.7 million for next year, again, is tied to that larger project that I talked about earlier that Sheila's working on. That you should start to hear some information on probably in the next 6 to 8 weeks. I would think you're going to start to hear more about that, because that's going to have to follow a public process.
Although
that's going to be a recurring revenue.
Explain it to me again, and I'm not trying to be snarky. I know we joke all the time.
Yes, you
but
are.
I on hand to Bible, I'm not trying to get Kurt Miller or anything like that. I just don't understand, and I'm not a numbers guy, but why create a budget that has money that doesn't exist? Because we always hear politicians say, hey, when you're at home and you're making your budget, and you got the checkbook out and you're got the erasers out, you don't budget for money that you don't have.
Yeah, well, listen, and that's a fair point. But, again, we are in very challenging economic times. And to leave money on the table and to force our residents to pay more in taxes than they should be, I think is not what we should be doing, We should be working as hard as we possibly can to keep the mill rate, to keep the taxes as low as we possibly can, and to leave this $5 million off to the side just to dump it into our fund balance at the end of the year and force our residents to pay $5 million more in taxes, I think is not something we should be doing.